When we speak to South African CEOs, there's some serious challenges. I think they're operational challenges. So the ideology of the ANC is not the issue. The policy of the ANC is not the issue. It's the execution that's the issue.
One must look at it in a balanced way and not say because Shell is leaving, therefore it's because of political reasons. I'm not so sure. I haven't read it anywhere.
Whether we like it or not, there's certain asset managers and pension funds that will always put capital into South Africa.
In the past 24 months, we're the biggest.
The 2024 general elections are over. We are now into the horse trading as we try and form a government where no single party has got a majority. And as we've said many times on the State of the Nation, this has real world implications. It has implications for the economy, most importantly, and to this end, we wanted to get the views of people who are on the floor, on the ground, that understand the economy, people that are involved in some of these markets that everybody seems to think is just one voice. There are many aspects to the market. So we thought there'd be no better place than to come to, I heard this gentleman on the radio earlier, a couple of days ago, and I thought he's a voice that must be heard. And that is the voice of former Premier of Mpumalanga, negotiator at CODESA, and a very important person in the first administration of this country, and a very important person within the ANC, past Treasurer General, and the roles we could just carry on forever, and that is Dr. Mathews Phosa. So we've got Dr. Mathews Phosa, and joining him will be the CEO of YW Capital, and that is Mike Pillay. So I thought it would be important that for this State of the Nation, we blend the politics, we discuss the politics of the day, which is around the coalitions, and the impact that all talks will have on the economy, especially as people need capital markets. These things have implications. So we're going to be talking politics and economics on the same show. So let's kick off. Dr. Phosa, welcome to the State of the Nation.
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be invited to address the State of the Nation.
Yeah. You never got to do one.
No.
Maybe you should have, but anyway. Let's start off with a little bit of a look back. How do we arrive at the situation where the once great ANC falls below 50%, loses 17% of national support in one election?
First of all, I think one must congratulate the people of South Africa that they are able to exercise their democratic rights within the framework of our constitution, which is a very good constitution, and to make choices of their own. No one forcing them to make those choices. And we've had several elections. The one produced Mandela, the other Thabo Mbeki, then followed by Zuma and Ramaphosa, and then we're here. If you look at the numbers from Mandela to Ramaphosa now, the ANC has been losing elections. And if you look at the moral fiber of the ANC has been decaying over these years. We have a high level of corruption in the country at the moment, which manifests itself in the public sector in a manner which is unimaginable. I mean, if you have 24 billion rand disappearing at the municipal level, according to the Auditor General's report, you ask yourself the question, what has happened to us? And where did it go to? And we saw during COVID how much money was stolen, literally stolen, and how much unauthorized expenditure was there. So corruption has manifested itself from top to bottom in various ways, but at the end of it for me is a low moral fiber, theft, theft as in S-T-E-A-L, by politicians. But of course, it took two to tango. The private sector is not made up of angels in this case. Because if you take the COVID time, it was private sector and politicians. And we should all take responsibility for where we are in this country. There are people who won't let a tender pass without saying, give me 10%. And these are people who take decisions on the same tender process. So there's decay in the system. And the people out there are asking for basic things: water, electricity, housing, roads. Question is, has the ANC delivered on those basic things? The answer is no. It's very limited. A lot of money disappears through the fingers of politicians who are supposed to spend it on building roads, ensuring there's electricity, there's housing, there's schools, there's clinics. They're not being built. And there's this stagnation. And the ANC made many mistakes. For example, there were vocational training institutions in the country. We closed them. And that's wrong to close them. But some of them would have be creating skills which we need today. A large part of our population, of the youth, is not skilled, is unemployed. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about. As long as they don't have skills, even if they are jobs, they will not be, the jobs won't welcome them. But they don't have the skills to execute those jobs. Business is about execution. If you walk into my office, I ask you, what can you do? And I can't work out what you can do. I'm not going to employ you. And that is a harsh reality. So unemployment keeps going up. People become angry with the government. Not only the government, our people in South Africa don't trust politicians. They don't trust government. So the level of trust is very low. These elections, if you read them from far, as the thing was developing, and I'm closer to the information that comes from Ipsos and other polling companies, nothing surprises me. Nothing. I saw it coming. 2 weeks ago, the number for the ANC was about 44. But internally, the ANC was murmuring 33, contrary to what people even think. I heard from activists that, look, guys, we're very low. I don't know if it was a scare figure to get the organizers to jump up, but that's the number we just mentioned. So between 33 and 44, we're at 40. That's the reality. And not only that, we've got new kids on the block. Former president of the ANC, Zuma, has decided to form his own party. He calls it MK, conveniently cutting the flesh of the former army of the ANC, MK, Joseph Mkhonto Sizwe. But he has used it efficiently, using his drama in the province of KwaZulu-Natal to win the biggest vote in that province. It's a very complicated, huge province. And to get the number he got, not even the late Chief Buthelezi could get that number. It must have been Chief Buthelezi's dream to unify that province that way, but which he never achieved in his lifetime. And Zuma must be saying, yeah, I achieved what Chief Buthelezi could not achieve. Is it a negative or a positive? I'm not able to judge, but we ask people to make their choices. You could not say in one voice, make your choices, and when some choices don't favor you, you begin to say it's a wrong choice. It's people's choice. And in the middle, you got all these small parties now, IFP, EFF, you got the DA on the other side. It's not small, but in terms of numbers, it's number 2 after the ANC. But the permutations in the provinces differ as well. But the spread of power is not in favor of the ANC. The ANC has actually lost power. And that's the reality.
Yeah. So by the sounds of things, the results don't shock you.
No, I've been studying them. I'm very attentive to this type of things because as a businessman, I'm concerned about the future of my country. Where is policy going with our investment in this country? I'm concerned about those things. Who is going to lead us? Are we going to be led by a thug or someone who's always ducking in and out of courts? Or are we going to be led by someone who sits in the office and concentrate on the people's business?
Okay, so you've sketched the reason that the ANC dropped to such a low level. And before we discuss potential coalitions and how that's going to play out, I suppose the burning question should be, will Cyril Ramaphosa survive? Or does that depend on the coalition formations?
I think in the short term, he's going to survive. He's going to be called upon to clean the mess, set up a new government, put it in place, and choose a new government, put cabinet ministers into places, and then make his choices.
So, which brings us on to various permutations that are going to become apparent as a result of this outcome. We understand the ANC's got 40%, and there's a whole lot of scenarios being thrown around. Now, I heard you have a particular view on the way the coalition could work out. What's your favoured, or there's two issues here. Which way would you like it to go, and which way do you think it's going to go? They may.
I'll answer both questions, but there's context. Yes. This nation was not born yesterday; it was born 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, we were faced with the same situation where we actually foresaw a situation where Mandela has to build a nation. And his approach to national reconciliation demanded that he should not rule alone. He should put in place a government that reflects big elements of the nation. And at that time, defining it in terms of black and white. But those were sharp divisions in this country, black and white. Even if the ANC did not fight against whites, but still it couldn't run away that the whites had genuine fears about the new ANC. Would it push us into the sea? Would it behave itself? What would it happen? That type of things. When long before we had what we call sunset clauses, where we agreed that the National Party would have a deputy president, and therefore we'll have two deputy presidents in government. We agreed that the army, the chief of the army was white, will stay. We agreed that the chief of the police will have to be white. We brought him from outside, General Fivers, to head the police, to try and create confidence. But so we had then a government of national unity, not a coalition. Big differences, where the government of national unity is based on principles agreed in advance, and the parties sign on them, and it's a consensual government. You try and find solutions between yourselves. You don't walk away tomorrow like a baby in tantrums. You respond to issues like a responsible leader. So that was what we put together. Okay, the National Party walked out later, but most of them, you can ask them, they regret why they did that. But it was working. They don't understand why the clerk said they must walk out, but that's what happened. One line, one whip in a line. So we learned from that. There were elements of the IFP in KZN having rigged the elections. And there was evidence. But Mandela said, guys, wait a bit. Let's be much wiser than what they did. Let's give them the province. Let the ANC not be great and want to govern the whole country. Western Cape is with the National Party, KZN with the IFP. Let's move on as a nation. It worked, give and take. Now today we're faced with the same scenario, but more complicated. More complicated. There's a lot of mushrooming of parties around us, which I don't think it's true to say they don't see eye to eye. They pretend not to see eye to eye. In private, they do see eye to eye. They do understand they're all South Africans. They must find one another. You will have a popular scenario for business which says ANC and DA. But if you go deep into the future, and I mean the next 2 years, both ANC and DA will lose a lot of votes in local government if they went together. And they know it. So for their own selfish reasons, it's not advisable for them to go together into bed. Doesn't matter what business thinks. Politics is about reality and practicalities. It's not about theory. So at the end, if the ANC went into a coalition with the DA alone, will pay a price, will lose more power very quickly. So the ANC is looking at other permutations, like IFP, EFF, and of course I heard Dr. Mukiza saying you should add MK in the mix. I understand where it's coming from. We sit in KZN, it's feeling the heat. It's entitled to that view. But I think principally it should be the ANC, the EFF, and the IFP. And they should invite other parties. That's one model. The other model is...
Sorry, when you say invite other parties, are you saying invite other parties but exclude the DA?
Yes, exactly. Exclude the ANC. I've been specific about this one. And of course, there's another model which I'm looking at of... whatever I said here, I've indicated to the president already. I'm not gossiping in the room. I've informed him and the deputy president. Is to look at what we call a voluntary government of national unity. A voluntary government of national unity might even include the DA, if you think about it theoretically, because it's parties which have achieved a certain threshold, which you are inviting into a cabinet, right? But then bound by principles again. But they all, because of their contribution to the national parliament, become part of the cabinet, national cabinet. It's another model, same, just the numbers will be more. But it creates more participation in my view. Now, whether or not these other parties are going to agree, I don't know. I was told that the DA has got a template of negotiations. You take it or you leave it. the spirit of you take it, you leave it. It's not the spirit of negotiations. I'm sorry. The spirit of negotiations is give and take. You do this. You give and take. And you should, in the national interest, give and take. Now, there's going to be a complication with KZN. Do you give MK the whole province? My answer is yes. Give them the whole province, but they must pay something for it. They must come to parliament when parliament convenes. They must vote for the same president or whoever. They must vote for a president of the country. They must vote for a speaker of the country. They must participate and not boycott the opening of parliament. That should be the price, the quid pro quo you give to them, for them to end the province without contestation. Their problems don't end up in KZN. It goes to Mpumalanga, where ANC has got 51%. There are other parties in between, and MK has got a number. In Mpumalanga, the MK must be saying, oh, we hope the ANC includes us in cabinet. But that will require negotiations. It will require give and take. It will require humbleness of MK in terms of that and KZN and national parliament. So these things are all interlinked. And again, when you try and look at the permutations in provinces, they may reflect the national picture, they may not. If you ask the Premier of Gauteng, Mr. Panyaza Rusuf, if you go into bed with DA, you tell him, listen, what did you smoke? He's not going to do it. But this experience with local government has not been a happy one. They've been always pushing one another in and out. You know, extremely. You either have the NC in municipality or you don't have it. It's not been the two of them. They've not been accommodative of one another.
Now, in that scenario, and here we start getting to that meeting point between politics and economics. Yes. If you have to have a situation where the DA is specifically omitted, left out of the negotiation, yes, because one would imagine they're perceived as this white party. Do you think that would do you think that would affect business and the economy?
No. We need a strong government to create stability in this country, irrespective of color. If it's a white government, it's a white government. If it's a black government, it's a black. If it's a mix, it's a mix.
Why omit the DA?
Because the DA is diametrically opposed to ANC policies. Completely. I can mention a few things. They're opposed to affirmative action. They're opposed to BEE. They're opposed to international stage, where the ANC says, don't kill children, women and children in Gaza. The DA opposes the ANC. So there's going to be too many opposition points.
Okay, so it's fine to do coalition with a government that wants to scrap the constitution.
They can't do it. That is not, no one, we know.
So because they can't do it, that's fine.
That's talk. Okay. We know it's talk. And everybody can spew hot talk. Yes. No one has got the numbers to change the constitution. It takes 2/3 majority.
Yeah. I'd like to bring Mesh in at this point. Mesh, you've sat there quietly, you've listened to what we've had to say. From a business point of view, now your YW Capital deals with a lot of local and foreign companies, institutions, etc. How are they viewing the situation at the moment?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. I think, firstly, it's important to say who we speak to internationally. You know, we're talking to some of the sovereign funds out of the Middle East, the pension funds in South Africa and globally, and then the high net worth and family offices globally. And I think they all want the same thing. They want a stable government. They want a certain government. And that's the challenge right now, is we don't know where we're going to go over the next few days. They want a government that's market friendly. They want a government that fights corruption. They want a government that upholds the legal frameworks in this country, as well as the financial frameworks and businesses in this country. And if we can get that, I think the international community will be very comfortable with putting further capital in the country. But at the moment, the reality is there's a lot of capital waiting on the sidelines, watching South Africa very closely and determining whether or not this is the right investment to make.
Yeah, just to pick up on what you said there's two issues. You mentioned a stable government, and then you mentioned a government that creates the environment for investment, if I could summarize the other things. Now, one could say that we've had a stable government. The ANC has had a majority. but they've created an environment that was extremely business unfriendly. So which one is it? Does it have to be both? Or, is there a preferable one? Do you understand what I mean? What I'm saying is to say that a stable government automatically means that it's good for business is a kind of a red herring, isn't it? Because we've had a stable government and they've done everything in their path to not be business friendly.
It's interesting. Over the last sort of 10 years, our net foreign inflows of investment has actually continually been positive in this country. So a stable government in itself is good and it's necessary. But for me, that's just the basic premise. I think a market-friendly government then moves it one step further to entice foreign investors, because we're competing with emerging markets. And if you're looking at putting your capital, whether it's in China or India or other parts of the world, you'll realize there's a huge competition for capital. And the competition for capital is not just international capital, it's South African capital, because our domestic asset managers are determining where to put their capital. And it's not always in SA. So I think it's critical that we have both if we want to continue to foster investment in our country.
I want to go back to Dr. Phosa because we've heard about this. We've heard the words market friendly, and a lot of the parties that are heading to negotiations have got a line that almost says, listen, markets aren't our people. We don't care about markets.
I think we care about markets. We care about business.
Who's we?
The ANC does care about business. It does care about markets. When you look at the left of the ANC, and there's a lot of noise there, is once you say you care about the market, you are anti the people, the masses. It doesn't follow. It doesn't follow. We want a growing economy which attracts foreign direct investment. We don't need to see the business as an enemy. Business is part of our society. It's the base of the society, the economy. So we need a government that's business friendly, that allows business an ear and an input. When I was premier, I used to work with Chamber of Commerce. I allowed business to make input on every aspect of policy, even if it didn't affect business. And that's how it should be. They must be part of defining the future of the country from point A to point B. I don't see any need for business to be the enemy of the government. If I was president, I'll make business my partner.
So why, so that sounds fantastic. However, certainly in the last, in the build-up to this election, President Ramaphosa, at that point a duly elected president, did everything in his power to be as business unfriendly as possible. Most probably easily identified with the national health insurance question, which is a business question. Business people saying, we've had this discussion, we are nowhere near the point where we feel that this legislation could be passed, but yet, I presume as an election ploy, the president passed that legislation. Do you think that the ANC still displays that business friendliness that it did under, let's say, the Thabo Mbeki regime?
The NHI is one example. There are many examples which shows the ANC has done very well. The ANC has always come up with market-friendly policies. It has always tried, in that difficult space, not to leave the masses behind, because there's been a history of discrimination. It was political discrimination and economic discrimination. I sometimes get the feeling that there are some people in business who feel that, it will sort itself out. It can't. You need an affirmative government which says there's more than 50 million black people here. They've been excluded from the mainstream of the economy. You can't have a nation where the economy is only run by white people and the blacks are out. You should find a way of saying, how do I bring the blacks in the mainstream of the economy? And business must not resist that. They must say, how do we work together with government to make sure it is like that? I don't think government should artificially let black people steal shares from white companies. We must all sweat out. We must all work for what we will ultimately deserve. But you can't close your eyes and say the black people will sort themselves out and pretend the apartheid government did include black people. It didn't. It deliberately and intentionally excluded them from the economy. And we need to deal with these issues if you are government. You can't avoid them. But you don't have to be hostile to private sector in doing so.
Mesh, you've had to operate in this economy. Do you agree that that the ANC government, up until now, has been largely business friendly?
I think that's a tough question. Is that when we speak to South African CEOs, there's some serious challenges. I think they're operational challenges. So the ideology of the ANC is not the issue. The policy of the ANC is not the issue. It's the execution that's the issue. And something that Dr. Phosa would probably agree with is where the ANC has not done as well as we would like them to have done is operationally. So for example, Eskom, and the challenge that we have with electricity, for example, Transnet, the challenge we have with, sort of our ports. I mean, our two ports were rated amongst the two worst port operations in the world, Durban and Cape Town, in the world. And so for us, it isn't a matter of that the ANC ideology is anti-business. In fact, they're more to the middle. The issue is they haven't executed and ensured that the SOEs are in place, and they haven't ensured that business has worked. They haven't ensured an environment where business can work with them. Now they are. So if you look at Transnet, what they're doing differently to what they did with Eskom is instead of turning it around by themselves, they're bringing business into that turnaround. And we hope that that will continue through other sectors in our economy. But the reality is that I think international investors, we have one investor who has put $1 billion into this continent. And when they look at South Africa, the majority of that capital still is put into South Africa. So I don't think the ANC has chased away foreign investment. I just don't think they've made it a place that is in sort of engendering good systems of a friendly business environment. I mean, the challenge is it's not as friendly as it could be. They could do much more than they have done. And our government, and I speak from a government perspective, because it's all parts of government. It's whether you're dealing with a municipality in one end, whether you're dealing with a province on the other, whether you're dealing with national government. I think our entire government needs to sit back and realize that there are two constituencies. There is the social constituency, which they deal with, but there's also the business constituency. And there is no way, I mean, you raised a point that was so important. There's no way you can give social services if you don't have capital, right? And I will tell you, the FDI coming into South Africa, 40% goes into manufacturing. 30% goes into mining and resources. Those create jobs. And we cannot avoid and we cannot afford not to give them, sort of place in this economy. So for me, it's very important that we attract international investment, in these sectors.
Earlier we were talking about the people that need to be considered as we head towards coalition government and the 7th administration in South Africa, which promises to look a whole lot different to what we got used to. The one word that never came up in what you were saying earlier was the taxpayer. In your discussions within the ANC, Dr. Phosa, is the taxpayer ever considered?
Well, all of us are taxpayers.
Yes, that's what I mean. I'm sort of saying, because you focus on interest groups. You focus on the poor, and we focus on the unskilled, and we focus on everything. But the people that are really, the engine that's driving this train is the taxpayer, which is many people at different levels. But, I've made this point repeatedly that there cannot be any question that the South African taxpayer gets terribly shortchanged in this economy.
I don't think the ANC will ever ignore the taxpayer. The taxpayer is the fuel in the vehicle that moves. Without the taxpayer, nothing will work.
So you're saying that in your discussions with them, you actually discuss the taxpayer?
Yes, of course.
You're not just the poor or the labor union affiliated workers or minimum wage or grant recipients?
I don't discuss minimum wage. I'm not a trade unionist. I'm a business leader, I'm a political leader. And we focus on all taxpayers. We look at corporate tax, for example. How does it impact in the economy, the investment in the country? Are we attractive to the outside world? You know, the issues Mesh is talking about the SOEs, I need to deal with it. I've got a view, and I think many people are beginning to realize that we need to get the private sector more and more participating in SOEs. And there are just too many. Some of them we must integrate them and rationalize them. They're all over the show, just sucking money. Sucking the money of the taxpayer, to talk about the taxpayer. So that rationalization is important. And there's never been a point at which the ANC had policies which are anti-foreign investment. Every effort, the president is all over the show trying to promote investment. So how can he be inimical to foreign investment when he goes out to look for money?
How can you say that when we've just come through a period where we've had companies like Shell, BHP Billiton, Starlink, many companies specifically, for the first time in South African history, other than isolation, right, where companies have specifically said we are actually withdrawing our physical investment in the country, which is what we need the most.
Before 1990, IBM left.
Yes, but,
no,
but what I'm saying is that was for a specific ideological reason, and quite justifiably. They were forced to leave whether they wanted to or not, or else they were going to be blacklisted internationally. I'm saying set that period aside, because that was very much driven by, in most cases, legislation in those countries, right? The Sullivan Code, right? We all remember it, or people should. Please have if you don't know what the Sullivan Code was, that was where international companies would be punished, much like we've got at the moment with Russia because of the invasion of Ukraine. Businesses were specifically precluded from investing in South Africa, and we saw a slew of disinvestments in the 80s because of that.
Yeah, but there were other companies which are not American, which disinvested.
Yes.
The German companies, some of them left because of what was happening there.
Yes.
This is the
But what
phenomenon.
I'm saying is we can't view them the same. They were leaving because of apartheid, right? Which is fine. Right? But now they're leaving electively. They're leaving a country because they find the business climate, the economy, not palatable for their own investment.
I haven't read that script. I think they're leaving on their own business reasons. They've never said to anybody they're leaving because of the policies of the government. And there's a lot of transaction happening between them and local companies. Why are local companies buying? One, they're buying them. They're not leaving. Two, billions are coming in from Middle East to this country. Why are you ignoring that? Why is Arab world having confidence in South Africa? They're investing here, the UAE, and the Qatar, they're all investing here. So there's trafficking of interest in the form of money, disinvestment and investment. One must look at it in a balanced way and not say because Shell is leaving, therefore it's because of political reasons. I'm not so sure. I haven't read it anyway. Yeah. But I know they're doing a transaction with a local company. The Anglo story is the same. So it's normal transactions. And transactions in business happen every day with me and Mesh buying and selling to each other. It could be me and Mesh and Shell. The fact that Shell is overseas doesn't make any drama. They happen to be in Netherlands, wherever they are.
Mesh, you deal with this all the time. And do you see those kind of very public disinvestments? There's nothing to see here. Somebody else will take it from them. It's all fine. I mean, I know that because as a young man, I heard a certain other government saying, "Oh well, go to hell. We don't need these investments. Other people will take that investment." I can promise you, I lived through that nightmare because that was a lie. I'm always get very concerned when governments say, "Oh no, it doesn't matter that they're disinvesting. To hell with them." What's your view?
So I think there's a couple of points here. So firstly, we're always concerned about disinvestment in South Africa. The reasoning behind the disinvestment is what Dr. Phosa was highlighting. And it's important for us to know what the strategy of Shell was and to understand that and why they left the country. If they left for business reasons, that is understandable. And we've got to then analyze what those business reasons were and could we have done a better job at keeping them in the country. I think it's really important to analyze that. But then at the same time, and I think what you and Dr. Phosa touched on is there's a number of other companies we're talking to in the oil and gas sector that are about to enter South Africa, that are huge international corporations, and that's a positive. So I don't think we would see them coming into South Africa if there wasn't some silver lining about what our economy is about to do. So that will be very interesting to watch that play out.
But sorry to interrupt, how did the South African economy grow bigger and the biggest in Africa in the past 24 months? We're the biggest. Before we're number 3.
Well, we haven't grown. We haven't grown. They've got smaller. What I'm saying is you can't. The numbers are the numbers. We've got no growth. In other words, I'm saying that one's a very easy one to answer. Yes, we're back on top in Africa. It's not a South African story, right? It's an Egypt and Nigeria story where they've gone, where their economies have shrunk.
But
let's get it right.
It is also a South African story. It shows we did not shrink.
Is that acceptable in a place with 50% unemployment?
I'm just saying we did not shrink. If you shrunk 0.5%, it's a loss on your bottom line. Yeah. We didn't shrink from a business point of view. We have maintained stability. We could do better.
You don't think that's a political equivalent of making 30% a pass mark?
No, it's not. Far from that.
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned because, to say, oh, look, at least we didn't shrink. That's a bit like the DA saying we did well in the election because we got the same number of votes.
It's not the same. I'm saying give South Africa credit. Don't rubbish it.
I will rubbish it because I think we should be having 5 and 6% growth. And I think it's very possible.
We should, and that must be a journey we go to. And that debate is healthy debate, that we should work towards higher percentages. But I
don't see us having that debate at all.
Well, I'm not a prophet. It will happen, and I don't know what you will say when it happens.
I would be delighted because I'd be 5 or 6% per annum richer, one would imagine.
So I've learned something in life. You never say never.
Oh, well, look, let's go back to investors and investors. I tweeted something which, those moments where you think, oh, that was quite clever. I can't believe what I thought about it. Somebody who was complaining in this discussion about coalitions that we shouldn't be listening to markets. And, I thought about it and I said, I thought to myself, well, my experience in markets, my experience in human behavior is, as you rightly point out, these companies go and one can examine their reasons for going and everybody's entitled to their choice. They've done it relatively publicly. But the real damage is caused when people leave silently. And what I said was, when you go and buy McDonald's tonight, you don't phone up KFC and say, you've lost a sale. I'm buying a hamburger from McDonald's, not chicken from KFC. You just do it. And that's going to reflect on the bottom line in both companies, right? And, I'm really concerned, not so much, I raised the interest because it makes for interesting shows when we talk about Shell and BHP Billiton and all these other companies that are quite vocal in their disinvestment in South Africa. But I think the biggest issue that sits at the back here is the silent disinvestment. People that were investors and decide there's a whole range of emerging markets out there. South Africa may not be the market for me going forward.
My experience is since 1994, those who were leaving the country were very loud. But when they returned, they were very silent. But they're here. I can give you an example of an Afrikaner guy who used to be at AWB, about his farm. He left for Australia, making noise, public speeches. He's back very quietly. And there are many like him.
Mesh, what are you seeing from some of the people you advise?
Yeah, I think for me, the crux of it is that we're not, I think the market recognizes this challenges with South Africa. When we compare it along other emerging markets, you're comparing against Russia, you're comparing against Turkey, you're comparing against China, you're comparing against some of the other, sort of entities like countries like Argentina. The reality is we have to stay competitive and we have to be enticing to the international investors because they don't warn you of where they're putting their capital. They just move their capital and realign it with their policy. Now, most of the international market, when they look at South Africa, they will look at the MSCI Emerging Market Index and determine how to weight their capital into this country. The reality is that we have to work harder to attract more foreign capital because you're competing against countries that are exceptionally competitive. India, for example. India has, over the last 5 years, just blown every expectation in terms of return. You have a country that's operating at a 6%, GDP return. That's unquestionable. A lot of our Indian investors, that we work with that have put capital into this continent over the last few years, say, right now, it's not that South Africa's uninteresting to us or concerning to us. It's more that India is hugely active and we can make tremendous amount of money keeping our money in India. So I think there's two elements when you look at the South African economy. You can say, as we compare it to other emerging markets, we'll probably have pros and cons to why you would invest here. But on the other side, you can also say that there's some other competitors of us that are doing better than we are. And that is where capital will go to. And they won't warn you because capital will move. Of course, every asset manager and pension has a mandate as to where they can put capital. And so we must always remember that, whether we like it or not, there's certain asset managers and pension funds that will always put capital into South Africa. One of the elements that we're seeing a lot of is not just Western capital moving into South Africa, but emerging market capital and African capital moving into South Africa. For example, some of the pension funds on the continent have now reached numbers that are significant. The Ugandan Social Pension Fund is almost $5 billion. We're working with a number of pension funds to change their mandate so that they don't invest only in country, but they invest more globally. And the recipient of that capital is South Africa. So for me, I think there's capital coming in two forms, both from the West and from emerging markets. But you're absolutely right, is we have to capture that capital because it's going to go somewhere else, and it's going to go somewhere else without warning as well.
Let me give you an example at the mining Indaba this year. I was called by the head of the one of the biggest funds in the UAE to a meeting, and he says, "When you see Transnet, they've got problems." I said, "Yes, they do have problems." But I decided to call Pravin for a breakfast with them. You know what they said to him? "We've got $24 billion for you." I'm talking about January this year. And you tell him about money leaving. Money is coming. And we're in negotiations with Transnet about that money, which they want to invest in rail, road, ports, harbors. $24 billion from UAE is hanging in the air. Yeah. And we're busy talking about it. If somebody tells money is not coming in, I'm not going to believe them.
The key word there is invest. They want to invest in this, which means they want a return in this. Doesn't mean that they want to give it to us. They want.
Well, I don't want to go into confidentialities, but part of it is be really giving. But I won't go into confidentiality. But the fact is, money, $24 billion is at our door, and someone must tell me money is not coming here. I said, go tell it to the chicken. The money is coming here. It means
so it's a matter of us capturing it.
Yeah, it's doing proper structuring in making ourselves attractive investment destination. I'm talking about what I'm dealing with.
So in the spirit of that, the money is there. I've no doubt that people have an appetite for South Africa. I think we almost have to be incredibly bad to not be getting the investment that we deserve.
So depending on what permutation prevails at the end of the day, South Africans have a big task of doing what we're talking about here. Create an environment friendly for investment. Begin to address the social services which are required to be addressed. There is no way you can say the economy is growing when some people's stomachs are empty. It's irresponsible government. We are a responsible government. We must build the economy, but we must create employment. We must ensure that there are roads with no potholes. There's water, clean water. There's electricity. The challenge for this new government, new permutation, whatever you call it, is big. It's bigger than even when 94 we took over. And I must say without being ashamed, when we took over 94, certain things were working. There were roads without potholes. There were hospitals which functioned. So it's a shame, but it's reality. And we need to get to normality.
I want to pick up, you mentioned India. And I want to just illustrate this. I've used this example before, but to me, in my life, it's been very instructive. You will recall, Dr. Phosa, back in 1991, South Africa were allowed back into international cricket. Steve Tshwete was one of the big enablers of that. And with much fanfare, we went on our first trip post-isolation to India because India had changed their vote. And South African cricket got back into international cricket, and we had 3 one-day matches in India. You may recall everything that was being spoken about was this cricket tour to India. But I want to talk about if you think about it this way, and if you recall, I don't know if you recall that particular trip, Dr. Phosa, Indian cricket couldn't afford to host South Africa. Indian companies couldn't afford to advertise on the ground. Indian broadcaster couldn't broadcast a picture that we could see in South Africa. We watched snow for 3 days. It was quite crazy, right? And South Africa paid for the entire thing. South African companies advertised at the Indian cricket ground, and everything was done because India couldn't do it. So the question is, what has happened in those 33 years since 1991? And that is that India liberalized their economy, opened their economy for investment, made it investor friendly, and South Africa perhaps didn't do. And to me, it's a very visual difference of what economic policy can do in a country when one makes it attractive to investors or not.
Well, I agree with you. India has done extremely well. I applaud them. I'm an investor in India, where the biggest avocado nursery in the world, ours, is in India, because of all those dynamics we talked about. It was failure. I'm not promoting them, but we are the biggest in the world. We've been installing AVO for 8% of the world. But India had no legacy of apartheid. India had no catch-up to do. In first day Mandela walked in, he had catch-up. You had to look at housing for black people, water for them, electricity for them. India didn't have those things. So you're comparing chalk and cheese.
India is a country known for its poverty as well. I'm not sure that your analysis holds, because if we're going to compare hard luck stories, India went through grinding colonialism. Yeah. All I'm saying is that
it's easy for you to talk like that. I was an oppressed person. Yes. I felt the pain like the millions of this country felt the pain. The pain of exclusion from education, from health services, from even churches. India didn't have that. They might have poverty. America's got poverty with all processes. We came from a low.
So does that justify?
No, it justifies nothing. It just explains that you're comparing chalk and cheese.
Okay. In closing, we sit here under a wonderful portrait of Madiba, right? A man that you work closely with, that in many ways was the character that gave his character to the new South Africa. You knew the man very well. What would he think of South Africa as it is now?
Well, you asking me to talk about Madiba, was my father in many ways. Yes. A university of life to me. My leader, the leader of our people. A man who believed in nation building and reconciliation. He will be very concerned whether or not, after these elections, we'll carry that legacy of nation building and reconciliation. He will be very concerned. He will wish that we don't make mistakes on race and tribalism. We unite our people. That's what he will think now. He will wish us that, And of course, obviously, he will wish that there's economic success in this country. He will mourn at the disasters of corruption, theft, and inefficiencies, which we refer to with mesh as well, in SOEs. He will want us to find solutions for SOEs. He will want us to find solutions for poverty. He will want us to build more confidence for the world to invest in South Africa. Mandela always believed that there must be new investment in South Africa. That's why he stopped sanctions against South Africa. Give him credit. He stopped sanctions. He said, let's stop this war. It's over now. Let's get money coming in, money feeling comfortable. Mandela will still wish us to attract more and more foreign investments.
Do you see a Nelson Mandela out there, a modern day person who could unite this country?
In South Africa? Yeah. No, there isn't, but we must find one.
I think on that note, let's go and find that person Dr. Mathews Phosa, thank you so much for joining us. Mesh Pillay, CEO of YW Capital, thank you so much. I think it's important that we have these engagements, that people understand that countries are complex entities, and South Africa has a very well-established economy, and there are many facets to it. So I hope you found today enlightening, and I hope you enjoyed the State of the Nation, and keep on watching. We'll bring you some more content. Please subscribe to the channel. And to my guests today, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again on the State of the Nation.